Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to welcome you all most warmly to the Oxford Centre for Islamic Studies on this very special occasion. I am honored to be introducing the 8th Secretary General of the United Nations as our lecturer today, and in his capacity as the Centre's Nelson Mandela Fellow. The Nelson Mandela Fellowship was established when the then President Nelson Mandela visited the Centre and delivered a memorable lecture in July 1997 entitled Renewal and Renaissance Towards a New World Order. The Centre is very proud to have been granted President Mandela's permission to establish this fellowship. We are now relaunching the fellowship on a visiting basis to be awarded to senior people from academia and international life who will address issues of global importance and issues of relevance to President Mandela's own values and legacy. We are delighted that the Secretary General has accepted to be our inaugural fellow. As an institution for the advanced study of Islam and the Muslim world, the Centre's primary focus is research, teaching, and publication. But the Centre has also consistently emphasized the need to bring people from different cultures and traditions together in an atmosphere of mutual respect. Indeed, I think it is only realistic to say that the need for this has greatly increased since the foundation of the Centre in 1985. This need was re-emphasized when our patron, His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales, delivered his inaugural lecture at the Centre on Islam and the West. So we are especially happy today to be welcoming to our fellowship someone who has committed so much of his life to promoting global dialogue and cooperation at the highest level. Ban Ki-moon had an extensive career as a diplomat, serving his country in senior capacities, culminating in his appointment as Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade from 2004 to 2006. He held office as Secretary General of the United Nations from 2007 to 16, following unanimous re-election in 2011. His greatest achievements included mobilizing world leaders to address new global challenges, including climate change and pandemics, issues he will be addressing in his lecture tonight, and meeting the needs of the world's the poorest and most vulnerable people, including in zones of conflict and deprivation. Under Secretary General Ban Ki-moon's leadership, the United Nations developed major initiatives on climate change, including successive climate change summits, which helped keep climate issues at the forefront of the global agenda. In 2015, member states adopted the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, committing to leaving no one behind. He was also called upon to lead the international response to many global crises, such as the impact of natural disasters. He sought to strengthen the United Nations response in areas of conflict by advocating for the responsibility to protect, aimed at preventing and halting genocide and other grave crimes. Since his retirement from the post of Secretary General, he has continued to champion these humanitarian causes in different ways, and more recently as the Deputy Chair of the Elders, the group established by the late Nelson Mandela to bring influence and experience to speak to power. It gives me additional pleasure to welcome you to the center as a Mandela Fellow, since we hosted a memorable event with the elders in 2014, with the participation of President Jimmy Carter, Mary Robinson, and led by your distinguished predecessor, Kofi Annan. The Secretary General has taken as his title tonight, How to Overcome Global Crises, Climate Change and Pandemics. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Ban Ki-moon.
Thank you, Dr. Farhan Nizami, Director of Oxford Center for Islamic Studies, for your warm introduction. Thank you, Lord Wood, Baron Wood of Enfield, Chair of the UN Association, United Kingdom, ambassadors, distinguished guests, professors, ladies and gentlemen. I am deeply honored to deliver this special lecture here at the Oxford Center for Islamic Studies. Hello, dear students, faculty members, good evening, salam alaikum. Before beginning my presentation, let me express my profound appreciation for Dr. Farhan Nizami's lifelong contribution to promote mutual understanding among the different cultures and civilizations. I am deeply impressed and grateful for his lifelong devotion to realize a better world for all the people. Dialogue among civilizations has been one of the top priorities of the United Nations during my time as Secretary General. Ladies and gentlemen, I feel fortunate to have this opportunity to deliver this timely special lecture on how to overcome global crisis, climate change, and pandemic. I am also incredibly happy to return here to Oxford University and meet the bright student after 2 years of limited travel restrictions during the pandemic. As you may remember, I have very wonderful memories of my visit as a Secretary General at that time in February 2011 to this storied institution of higher learning, when I delivered here at the Civil Forster Lecture on Human Protection and the 21st Century. That was 11 years ago. At that time, I emphasized the importance of responsibility to protect, what is known as R2P. I called upon UN member states and the international community to protect and stand up for all the people caught in the crossfire and those who are wondering, can the world hear my call? Who will help me and my family? This R2P was a new concept adopted by the world leaders in 2005 on the occasion of 60th anniversary of the United Nations. They really wanted to do something, and the idea of responsibility to protect was adopted by whole world's leaders. But that was not implemented at all until my time. During my campaign, I promised that when and if I would be elected as a Secretary General, I will make this R2P implemented. R2P really is targeting for genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and ethnic cleansing. This was first implemented in 2011 during the time of Arab Spring against Libya. After that, unfortunately, because of the Russian Federation's strong opposition, this has not been implemented. This is what I would like to emphasize again. Now, I don't know, I didn't intend to say something about almost the same situation which is happening in Ukraine by outrageous aggression by Russian Federation of Ukraine. So let me say just a few words before I would dwell on climate and pandemic. It's quite unfortunate that 11 years after, I have to repeat what I did 11 years ago. Ladies and gentlemen, Russia's invasion of Ukraine is an outrageous act of aggression. The members of the elders, where I belong, where I work as a vice chairman, as you know, as was introduced, elders, I think, was founded by Nelson Mandela, and it was led by many distinguished global leaders, like most recently by my predecessor, Kofi Annan. The President Carter was a member, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and there are many Nobel Peace Laureates and many global leaders. At this time, we are 10 of them, global leaders and some Nobel Peace Laureates. Now, in the name of the elders, we announced a very strong message, statement. Putin's actions constitute a clear violation of international law and the United Nations Charter. This war is a dangerous threat to global peace and security. The invasion is causing death, destruction, and misery on a scale unseen in Europe for several decades. We all stand with the people of Ukraine who are resisting this assault on their homeland. The crisis cannot be solved through violence. Diplomatic channels should always be the first and the only choice. We also stand with the brave Russian citizens who are publicly voicing their own opposition to the war initiated by their own president. President Putin's decision to place Russia's strategic nuclear arsenal on special alert is a particularly shocking development. Nuclear weapons pose an existential threat to humanity and undermine the road to peace. We therefore urge Russia to cease the hostilities, spare the lives of thousands of innocent civilians, and commence peace negotiations immediately. In this regard, deeply concerned that the UK government proposed a two-tier system which would discriminate against the refugees arriving from Ukraine through irregular routes is both contrary to the United Nations Refugee Convention and would undermine the integrity of the global asylum systems. I hope that political leaders of the United Kingdom will be render the humanitarian assistance to them. The elders, again, welcome the decision by the chief prosecutor of the ICC, International Criminal Court, which was announced recently, to begin investigation into the alleged crime of aggression. Failure to hold President Putin accountable will further undermine the rules-based international order. If we allow the crimes of aggression to go unchallenged, we are likely to see further violations, a continuing breakdown of the peace and security the United Nations was established to protect. The elders also called for a special criminal tribunal to investigate alleged crime of aggression in Ukraine. Ladies and gentlemen, dear students, let me discuss about the topics which I originally prepared. That's what the climate change and pandemic. The ongoing COVID-19 pandemic continues to upend our economies, societies, and the way of our lives. At the same time, our planet is on fire, literally and figuratively, with the climate crisis deepening as the temperatures rise, surge, floods rage, and wildfires burn. COVID-19 and other global crises, such as climate change, have underlined our fundamental interconnectedness. They have also made it clear that we need global solutions born out of cooperation and global partnership to address the great challenge we are now facing. I've been urging and emphasizing that however one country or group of countries like the United States or European Union may be powerful or resourceful, there is not a single country in this world or group of countries who can deal with these global problems alone. We need a global partnership. We need to put our all hands on the deck together. That's a very important lessons which we are learning. I hope that world will not make any mistake repeating the same mistakes which have caused a lot of trouble. I also would like to emphasize that COVID-19 has offered us a glimpse of global disruptions, public health perils, mass displacement, turmoil to supply chains, increased conflict, and protracted economic crisis. Both pandemics and climate change are global issues which require, again, strong multilateral response and international cooperation and partnership. We have seen some breakdown of multilateral systems by the country who has been really leading with multilateralism. That's the United States during the time of President Trump. When COVID-19 began, instead of supporting WHO, he withdrew. When we have to address climate change, as soon as he became president, he withdrew from hard-fought, hard-negotiated Paris climate change agreement. Luckily and fortunately, President Biden just took on his first day to return to Paris climate change agreement and return to WHO. That we have to continue. We must strive to better emphasize prevention as a mechanism to address armed conflict and suffering. And we must go further in bolstering international justice and accountability in the face of war crimes. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to begin by providing you with a bit of an overview on the wide-ranging global disruptions and impacts of COVID-19 pandemic. With nearly 500 million global cases, and close to 6 million tragic deaths, this pandemic has caused immense suffering and serious challenges all around the globe. COVID-19 has also amplified existing inequalities in health, labor, housing, food, gender, and other key areas. These impacts, alongside rising inflation, have converged to create the most significant global socio-economic crisis since the Great Depression. For example, the United Nations estimates that COVID-19 cost 225 million full-time jobs in the year 2020 alone. The Global Network Against the Food Crisis says that the number of food insecure people is now at 155 million people, a 5-year high as a result of the pandemic. And UNICEF warns that 1/3 of the world's children are unable to access remote learning during school closures. Under this troubling backdrop of the global development landscape, it is clear that ongoing recovery will be both extended and arduous. And this is particularly true as vaccine and therapeutic inequity continues to extend the pandemic for so many all around the world, particularly those in developing countries. To ensure that we recover correctly, it is not enough to build back. We must build back better and build back greener. Indeed, our recovery from COVID-19 must simultaneously address climate action. Doing so will go a long way in helping to guide us towards a more sustainable and resilient net zero future for all people and our planet. With this in mind, I firmly believe that the international community must actively scale up global leadership and cooperation in the sphere of public health. We must also expand preparedness in anticipation of both the next wave and the next pandemic. Modern pandemics are increasingly interrelated to biodiversity loss, closer interaction between humans and animals. Global leaders also need to strongly champion multilateralism, as I said. To do this, first, we need to ensure equitable distribution of COVID-19 vaccines and treatments and go much, much further in our fight against vaccine inequity. This is the most pressing task ahead of us, and one that can strengthen multilateral collaboration. Thankfully, a variety of safe and effective vaccines are being distributed around the world. This is incredibly encouraging, with nearly 10.6 billion total vaccine doses administered to date. But at the moment, only about 64% of the global population, mostly those in wealthy countries, have received one jab at least of a COVID-19 vaccine. In fact, just 13% of total number of global doses has been administered in low-income countries. Only 2% of people in Yemen had just one dose. And among the total shots that have been given around the world, only 17% of those have been on the African continent. Indeed, global leaders have a moral and humanitarian obligation to rectify the current situation of gross vaccine and treatment inequality. And we must remember, no one is safe until everyone is safe around the world. The virus does not respect borders. I am encouraged that the wealthiest G7 nations pledged to donate 1 billion vaccine doses by the end of this year. However, with around 11 billion shots necessary to vaccinate the world, 1 billion is too less. When stealth Omicron threatening to derail the hard-won gains in containing the virus to date, more commitments are desperately needed. With this in mind, all nations should enhance support for the UN COVAX mechanism and its mission to get vaccines to those in need. In its mission, many wealthy nations such as United Kingdom, United States, and European Union are now emerging from painful Omicron waves that infected a high number of people and shedding long-standing COVID-19 restrictions. This is wonderful to see. I was surprised when I arrived here. Almost nobody was wearing masks. I was almost the only one. Therefore, that's a very good sign, very good sign. But we should also understand that until, as I said, until everybody is safe, nobody will be safe. That's one thing, one lesson. With this in mind, I reiterate again the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres' appeal for global vaccination plan to double production and reach 70% of population by mid-2020. We have both the resources and ability to do so, but just lack the political will. Political will. Political will solve resources and all other issues. That's what lessons which I learned, and I have been emphasizing all the times. Please raise your political will. In addition, political leaders should interlink national and global COVID-19 recoveries to climate action. Climate action. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let us look at how we are doing with climate change. I think you must have heard a lot, if I may repeat again, since industrialization, humanity has achieved remarkable economic growth and technological progress. Industrial revolution began here in the United Kingdom. However, in the process, in the name of development, serious environmental damage occurred, and global warming and climate change has ensued as a result of reckless human-made carbon emissions. As biodiversity and habitat are destroyed due to environmental destruction, wild animals have increasingly come into contact with humans, and as a result, novel viruses and pandemics have spread. Indeed, nearly all of the viruses that have emerged in the 21st century, from SARS in 2003 to COVID-19, share the characteristics of being common infectious diseases between humans and animals. As such, the climate crisis and pandemic are two sides of one coin, and they are inherently intertwined. In 2021 alone, historic rain dramatically deluged central China, and the Mediterranean has been in flames with the terrifying wildfires burning in Greece, Turkey, Algeria, and beyond. And catastrophic flooding submerged part of Germany and Belgium underwater last summer. I was told that the flooding in Germany was the largest the first time in 1,000 years. I couldn't believe that heavy rains and flooding in Germany. The 5 hottest years of globally recorded temperature have now all occurred since 2015, during last just 6 years. July 2021 was the Earth's hottest month ever recorded in human history. In addition, there have been apocalyptic predictions that the time of 6th mass extinction may occur within 100 years. It's really appalling. Do you know when the last 5th mass extinction happened? That happened 65 million years ago. Then why our generation, or not our generation, maybe next generation, may suffer, may perish because of mass extinction? Mass extinction, by definition, means 70%, more than 70% of all the species will perish. This is a warning by the scientists, by the climatologists of the world. So we have to listen very carefully. As such, climate change is clearly threatening the survival of humanity in all of its aspects. Frankly, if we do not act now, humanity's future survival will be greatly imperiled. At the heart of such action, there is no other way than to drastically slash the planet's carbon emissions. But warming is not just a future threat. A landmark study released recently in the scientific journal Nature says that nearly 37% of all global heat-related deaths can now be blamed on human-caused climate change. How can we mitigate these dire threats? Western nations such as United Kingdom, US, and European Union certainly cannot do it alone. Nor can Asian nations such as Korea, China, Japan, or others. What is needed indeed, an unprecedented global effort propelled by multilateralism, solidarity, and partnership. In this regard, I'd like to highly commend the leadership of the United Kingdom as the chairman country of the COP26 in November, Glasgow last year. I had about 45 minutes talk with Minister Alok Sharma this morning before coming here, and I have really urged the United Kingdom is still the chair country until November this year, until Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt takes over. Therefore, I urged him, just exercise your political influence, leadership until the last day of your chairmanship. But we have to work all together. Ladies and gentlemen, during my 10 years as a Secretary General of the United Nations, I am proud to have prioritized this fighting global climate issues and also sustainable development goals. All these two took place, happened, were realized during my time. So my mission was to have made this Paris Climate Change Agreement adopted and Sustainable Development Goals presented to the world's people. And I retired from this. Now it is in the hands of succeeding leadership. The Paris Climate Change Agreement offers us a clear game plan to confront the serious threat to our planet. It sets viable targets to impede rising temperatures, constrict greenhouse gas emissions, and spur climate-resilient development and green growth. I still believe the Paris Agreement offers us our best hope to persevere over the serious threat to our planet. But we must urgently step up implementation efforts. We do not have planet B. We don't have any other planet except this Earth. Therefore, we don't have any plan B either. We only have a planet A. We only have a plan A. That has been my message all the times. And we don't have time to spare. Indeed, the sobering UN IPCC report and most recent report, which was released on 28th of February last month. These are really shocking. They said that climate crisis is now inevitable, unprecedented, and irreversible. It also details the rapid, large-scale emission reductions can still succeed in restricting the planet's temperature rise below 1.5 degrees. What is really alarming is that we set the target to contain global temperature rise below 1.5 degrees Celsius. But the report by WMO last year, they said already 1.1 degrees has gone up. So we have only 0.4 degrees Celsius left. That's why we are strongly urging that unless we achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, we'll have to regret for our succeeding generations. That's very urgent and strong messages, are warnings. Doing so will be difference between either charting a secure and prosperous future for students, such as yourselves, distinguished guests, sitting front. We may be okay, we may go, but I think sitting above all these floors, I think you have to raise your voice to us and to all these distinguished guests here, your professors. I've been speaking to young people. Raise your voice to your prime ministers and presidents and mayors, governors, parliamentarians, and even business leaders. Make sure that you make this world sustainable, climate resilient. This is the place where we will be living. That's your moral and political responsibility. I'm urging you, our dear students, to raise your voice. Ladies and gentlemen, with this in mind, in order to faithfully implement the Paris Agreement, all stakeholders without any exception, must expand their actions to cut emissions and expedite the rapid decarbonization of global economy to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. Fortunately, we have promises from more than 140 countries. This is what have been announced during Glasgow COP26. That was owing to great leadership of United Kingdom. Alok Sharma came twice to Korea and met many people, including myself. And he has been traveling, including Foreign Minister Rad. So your effort and leadership really helped a lot. 140 countries. Korea, even my country, was even very much reluctant to announce it. But upon some political pressure, this kind of political pressure is a good pressure. Some other pressures are normally rejected by sovereign states, but this is really a humanitarian pressure. We should remember, again, another one is a climate funding. Climate funding. European countries, I think you have your own, but there are still many developing countries, small island developing states. They do not have any resources, any technology. They don't have any technology. So we have to provide the necessary funding. There was a strong commitment in 2009, under my watch, in Copenhagen. European Union, United States, Japan, on behalf of all these OECD countries, announced that we will, don't worry, sign this one, sign this. But at that time, we were not able to sign. Just to encourage the developing countries to sign climate agreement, we will provide you, don't worry, $100 billion every year. That promise has not been met until after how many years? Now we are even 22. So 13 years after, is a still promise not fulfilled. The United Nations has created, just to prepare to distribute in an efficient way, green climate, GCF, Green Climate Fund. The headquarters is located in Korea. This GCF is just the empty shell, no money. We expected that United Kingdom leadership would have just finalized the formula, roadmap of this last year, but you are not able to do that because of lack of, again, political will. The United States, they use billions of dollars. UK, European Union also, but you didn't have $100 billion. It has been now deferred to Sharm el-Sheikh in the hands of Egypt. This morning, I asked Alok Sharma, you must make sure that in Sharm el-Sheikh, the promise you made in Glasgow must be realized and present the roadmap to the many developing countries so that they can join all this decarbonization process. Again, this is really a matter of political will. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to say just another issue. There are two policy initiatives. One is mitigation and adaptation. We have done some mitigation. We know that we have to cut down these emissions, etc., etc. But when it comes to future risks, we have to be very intelligent and wise to invest wisely to adapt to the changing climate situation. For example, invest wisely in infrastructure, which would be climate resilient, and invest wisely on agriculture so that we can have the smallholder farmers in sub-Saharan Africa, many developing countries. I think it is very important so that we can feed the people. And many small island developing countries where I visited, now even planting some plant trees so that these shorelines would not be washed away. Mangroves. There's a lot of mangroves there. If they plant these mangroves on the shorelines, then this will also even help. This does not cost much money. Therefore, it would be very important for OECD countries to provide $100 billion and also double, as was agreed in Sharm el-Sheikh, double the amount of the adaptation support. Ladies and gentlemen, now, in addition to elevating political will, another one is educating the people on climate, educating the people. And leading educational institutions like Oxford and young people like yourselves have a crucial role to play in this regard. We need all young generations to be properly educated on the necessity and importance of living harmoniously with our nature. This can be done only by providing quality education. I've been really urging Korean government, let's put all this importance of living wisely, living harmoniously with the nature should be taught from the elementary school level, so that when they grow up, when they become the leaders of the society, they would be fully equipped with all this necessary knowledge about the importance of environment. And the younger generation are the future leaders and indispensable global citizens who I firmly believe can lead us to a brighter, more sustainable, and more inclusive future. So again, as I said, raise your voice. Now, let me just conclude. Now, before I conclude, I'd like to talk a little bit more about global citizenship. During my time as UN Secretary General, I understood that young people, and particularly women, are absolutely essential to solving so many of the world's biggest challenges. The active engagement, indeed, and empowerment of youth and women is central to ensure the success of international community, including climate change, sustainable development goals. Consider the fact that young people and women comprise at least 75% of total global population. So we must do much more so that they will be engaged and they will be empowered, as they are the enablers to help achieve our sustainable development, climate action, and peace-building goals. By doing so, we can help unlock their unbridled potential as the agent of change and global citizens of tomorrow. Global citizenship is an important concept that can serve as a unique tool to help solve some of our most pressing challenges and help us reach our global goals. Global citizens, who are the global citizens? They are those who identify themselves not as a member of a certain country, not as a citizen of a certain country, but as a citizen of this whole world. We carry passport. I've been saying that you have to carry passport, but this is only for administrative purpose to identify. But you are global citizens. I've been urging young people, forget about your nationalities. Act as a global citizen. When I was a young boy, at the age of 18, I was quite lucky enough to meet President John F. Kennedy. You might have read in the media my personal history. I was a very rural boy from a very rural, poor country, Korea. I was not even able to meet my mayor of my city, not to mention President of Korea. Then I met in the White House John F. Kennedy. That was a huge, something like I got the star, like in the sky. What he told us, there were 140 international students from 40 countries. He said, look, the political leaders do not talk easily among themselves because of the Cold War, East and West. The national boundaries do not mean much. At that time, national boundaries were strictly enforced. But he said national boundaries didn't mean much. Since you are young, you can meet all other people as you are doing now. Then what he told us that what is important is to extend your helping hand to others. That was the spirit of global citizens. That's what I have been always explaining and urging young people. That's why the first thing I did after my retirement as a Secretary General was to establish a Ban Ki-moon Center for Global Citizens. It's located in Vienna now, Austria. I'm working with the former President Heinz Fischer, former President of Austria. We really want to see the young people have a greater say in their own destiny, as well as a greater stake in their own dignity. Alongside the United Nations, civil society, and other key stakeholders, I think, and I have seen this, how important role this Oxford Center for Islamic Studies and the Ban Ki-moon Center for Global Citizens. I think we are natural allies, natural partners. We can work together in partnership for next generation in bridging global citizen leaders. Now let me really conclude. I haven't spoken quite a long time. Dear students and the young leaders of our future and the professors, distinguished guests, I strongly believe that persevering over COVID-19 and fighting climate change are two efforts that simply must unite the world and all of its global citizens through cooperation and partnership. Quite plainly, simply, our collective existence moving forward depends on it. I truly hope that today's lecture will help you think more critically about the importance of cooperation, partnership, solidarity in response to the major challenges our humanity and our planet are facing. And these challenges will continue to face tomorrow and day after tomorrow. I also hope that young leaders will take a stronger leadership and challenge your government and business leaders. And I encourage you to expand your efforts in your future work and careers. I'm also interested, in light of my lecture, to learn if you have any other ideas of how the international community can transform the challenges we now face during the pandemic into opportunities to construct a more sustainable, inclusive, and resilient and peaceful world for all. Dear students, ladies and gentlemen, please do everything you can as global citizens to build bridges, collaborate across borders, and speak out against intolerance in all its forms. Prioritize cooperation, empathy, and action in defense of our planet. Support the plight of all refugees, regardless of if they are from Ukraine, Syria, or any other place. Live and work in pursuit of peace. We only have one planet, and our ability to sustain it will dictate the viability of our collective future. I believe that everyone has a moral responsibility to act wherever they may be. The challenges we face today are simply unprecedented. Therefore, our response, one underpinned with the global citizenship, action, and compassion, will be equally unprecedented as well. Ladies and gentlemen, let us work together to make this world better and sustainable so that everybody can enjoy prosperity in common. I think that is our moral and political responsibility for our succeeding generation and making our planet Earth sustainable forward. I thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
May I now invite Lord Wood, Chairman of the UK UN Association, to thank Secretary General on our behalf. And I know that there were many people who wanted to ask a question, and I'm sorry not to have included you, but there are, I'm told, many people in the adjoining hall, so we would have to leave so that we can spend some time with them on our way out.
Thank you, Farhan. I'm Stuart Wood. I'm chair of the United Nations Association UK and also fellow at Magdalen College here. And I will be brief. I don't want to stop the walkabout from happening in the overflow hall. But my role is very briefly, to thank very much the Secretary General Ban Ki-moon for coming here today, for being willing to give an open lecture to such a large and diverse audience here at the magnificent Oxford Centre for Islamic Studies, and sharing his insights on the issues that are going to define the generations that are represented here in this room. A word of thanks also in passing to Farhan himself and the team here at the Oxford Centre for Islamic Studies. It's always been encouraging to see how much effort Farhan has made over the many years to bringing senior figures in international leadership and international diplomacy to Oxford. Kofi Annan, Nelson Mandela himself, Jimmy Carter, as well as the Secretary General in a previous meeting. What I took from this lecture, firstly, that the case for the United Nations is not just nostalgia for the institutions that were created in 1945 and 46, that a commitment to those principles that animated that amazing moment requires reform and adaptation and renewal now. And that's your generation's challenge rather than ours. That rediscovering those principles requires rediscovering old ideas like responsibility to protect that had a moment and perhaps have receded too far. that areas like conflict prevention, pandemic cooperation, economic cooperation, climate change, these are areas where there are too many silences in the international legal and political landscape. And that equity in response to COVID, climate change, and many other challenges is not just about justice between nations, but it's about self-interest as well. Now, at its best, the United Nations gets a lot of criticism, much of it justified, but at its best, what distinguishes the UN and those who have the privilege of serving in it, and I hope many of you will or maybe have done and will again serve in the United Nations, is the determination to walk towards crises when they happen, rather than run away from them. And we've seen literally the spirit of that instinct to move towards danger, towards gross human need in the last few weeks in our TV screens watching what's happening in Ukraine. And in his time as Secretary General, that courage to walk towards the crises that we all face characterized Secretary General Ban Ki-moon's tenure. On Darfur, where he showed extraordinary persistence in the face of terrible tragedy. On climate change, when he was prepared to speak truth to power to, not mentioning any names, but skeptical US Republican presidents. Challenging the United Nations itself on peacekeeping and institutional reform. And leadership and a duty of care to the staff of the United Nations who work in the most dangerous and troubled of places. So if we ever need to recapture the courage that the Secretary General showed in his time, now is that moment. So thank you, Secretary General, for reminding us of the scale of the challenges we face, the importance of responding to these challenges by re-embracing and renewing the institutions of multilateralism, not by walking away from them. And you were very clear, and that's a message to national governments now. And a reminder that in climate change, in COVID, as much as in economic crisis, and sadly the return of the threat of nuclear confrontation, no one is safe, in your words, till everyone is safe. So the creation of the United Nations was a little miracle of the post-Second World War period, and it's far from perfect. It's often said that if it didn't exist, however, we'd have to invent it now. What I think is also true is that keeping it relevant requires the next generation to reinvent the kind of multilateralism that exists, not just preserve the institutions that were created by the previous generation. And the spirit of multilateralism from now on is going to be animated much, much more by people mobilizing together rather than just letting governments mobilizing together through the traditional offices of the United Nations. So thank you, Farhan. Thank you, Secretary General. And to echo one of your phrases, we only have one planet. Raise your voices. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.